It was never supposed to happen like this. One moment, everything felt ordinary. Just another day, just another evening in a life that had become predictable. But in the next, I stood before my husband, Benjamin, carrying a truth that could shatter everything. The weight of it pressed down on me, suffocating and inescapable. Guilt curled itself around my ribs, but it wasn't just guilt. It was fear, fear of what would come next. The fallout, the revenge. I never imagined things would spiral into this. I had believed I could walk away, scathed but still standing. But Benjamin, he wasn't the man I once thought he was. He had changed. And what he did in response, I never saw it coming. The consequences were far more brutal than I ever could have anticipated. I used to believe my life was perfect. I used to tell myself Benjamin and I were happy. But lately, it felt like we were merely going through the motions, existing side by side without truly seeing each other. He was always buried in work, his attention elsewhere, his thoughts a million miles away. I tried to reach him, to talk to him, but our conversations had become hollow, words exchanged out of habit rather than meaning. It was as if he wasn't really there anymore. The more he drifted away, the lonelier I felt. And then, there was Jack. We had known each other for years, but it wasn't until recently that we reconnected. Jack had always been charming, effortlessly charismatic, the kind of man who made conversation feel easy. And somehow, he understood me in a way Benjamin no longer did. He listened, really listened, when I needed to be heard. His attention felt like a lifeline, something warm and steady in the growing coldness of my marriage. At first, it was nothing. Just a few messages exchanged here and there. Casual chats over coffee. Harmless nostalgia. But as time passed, I began to wonder, was it truly harmless? Or was I searching for something I had lost? What started as friendly conversation turned into something more. Jack's words grew softer, more intimate. His compliments were laced with a subtle flirtation that made my pulse quicken. I told myself it was innocent, just playful banter. I wasn't doing anything wrong. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Deep down, I knew I was treading dangerous waters. Benjamin had stopped seeing me. I had become invisible to him. But Jack saw me. Really saw me. The way he looked at me, the way he made me feel, it became intoxicating. My loneliness had made me vulnerable, and soon, I found myself craving his attention more than I was willing to admit. The idea of meeting him in person crept into my mind, whispering its temptations. I told myself it would be nothing. Just two old friends catching up over coffee. Harmless. But I knew better. And yet, I didn't stop myself. When the day arrived, I kept reassuring myself, it was just coffee. No big deal. But the moment I saw Jack, something shifted. His gaze lingered on me in a way that sent my heart racing. I tried to focus on our conversation, to keep it light, but every touch, every glance, carried something unspoken. The tension between us thickened, undeniable, electric. Then, before I could think, before I could stop it, it happened. His hand brushed against my cheek, and I froze. For a fleeting second, I considered pulling away. But I didn't. The kiss wasn't hesitant. It wasn't soft. It was hungry, intense, all-consuming. It took my breath away. And in that moment, I knew, I had crossed a line I could never erase. The guilt hit me like a wave. But so did something else. A thrill. A rush. Something dark and exhilarating. I should have stopped. But a part of me didn't want to. When I returned home, everything felt different. My pulse was erratic, my thoughts tangled in a storm of regret and desire. But I had to act normal. I had to pretend nothing had happened. Benjamin was there, stretched out on the couch, his attention fixed on his phone, completely oblivious to what I had just done. I sat beside him, but my mind was still with Jack. The fire of his kiss, the weight of my betrayal, the way it made me feel. It consumed me. Benjamin didn't seem to notice. He never did. But after a while, I felt his gaze on me, lingering. As if he sensed something was off. He didn't ask. Didn't push. And somehow, that silence was worse than if he had confronted me outright. I wanted to confess. To tell him everything. But another part of me, one I didn't recognize, wanted to bury it. to pretend nothing had happened and carry the guilt alone. Jack kept messaging me, pulling me deeper into the lie. It became harder and harder to resist. I despised myself for it. And yet, I couldn't seem to stop. Should I admit what I had done? Or should I pretend, carry on as if nothing had changed, and bear the weight of my own sins? But then, something unexpected happened. Over the next few days, Benjamin started acting differently. At first, I thought I was imagining it, reading too much into things. But no. Something about him had shifted. He was suddenly more attentive, smiling more often, making an effort in ways he hadn't in years. He even offered to cook dinner, suggested we go out, just the two of us, like we used to. It was thoughtful, almost too thoughtful, and it felt off, like he was trying too hard. I watched him carefully, trying to make sense of it. And then, one evening, something happened that sent a shiver down my spine. Benjamin took out his phone, glanced at a message, and for just a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. An emotion I couldn't quite place. The moment he realized I was watching, he locked his screen. Immediately. Too fast. Too deliberate. It was subtle, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. Did he know? Was he hiding something, too? I wasn't sure what to think. When Benjamin suggested a date night, I hesitated. It had been so long since we had done anything like that, just the two of us. Maybe this was his way of trying to fix things, to rebuild what we had lost. The guilt inside me was unbearable, but I let myself hope. Maybe this was the fresh start we needed. Maybe this could mend everything. So, I said yes. The restaurant was quiet, its dim lighting casting soft, flickering shadows between us. The gentle hum of music filled the air, the kind of melody that should have felt intimate, comforting. But beneath the glow of candlelight, nothing felt safe. I wanted to believe this night was a fresh start, a step toward something salvageable. For a fleeting moment, I even convinced myself that things were normal again, that we could move past everything, that Benjamin would never have to know. But then something changed. As the night wore on, an unsettling feeling crept over me. Benjamin was too calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from peace, but something else, something deliberate, calculated. His eyes, steady and unblinking, held an awareness I couldn't quite interpret. And then, without a word, he reached into his pocket and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. My heart stopped. I hesitated, staring at it as if touching it would make everything unravel. But I had no choice. Slowly, I reached for it, my fingers trembling. The moment my eyes landed on the words inside, my stomach twisted into impossible knots.
Jack.
Panic surged through me. He knew. I lifted my gaze, searching his face for some sign of anger, some indication of how much he had uncovered, but he didn't react. He didn't explode. He just sat there, composed in a way that sent a chill through my veins. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating, wrapping around my throat like an invisible noose. "I think it's time we have an honest conversation," he said finally. His voice was quiet, eerily controlled, laced with something I couldn't quite decipher. Reality crashed over me like a tidal wave, drowning me before I could even breathe. My mind blanked, my pulse roared in my ears. He knew about Jack. He knew everything. But there was no rage, no accusations, no demands for explanations. Instead, there was something far worse, emptiness. I reached out, desperate to explain, to apologize, to say something that could make this right. But Benjamin wasn't listening. He reached into his pocket again, and this time, he pulled out a single silver key. Without a word, he slid it across the table toward me. The moment it landed in front of me, the weight of it crushed me. It wasn't just a key. It was a symbol. Of everything I had taken for granted. Of everything that had been lost, our marriage, our trust, the security I had once thought unshakable. Tears burned at the edges of my vision, but I fought to hold them back. "Benjamin, please," I whispered, my voice barely audible, my hands clenching into fists against the table. I never meant for any of this to happen. But he didn't react the way I expected. He didn't yell. He didn't break down. Instead, he simply looked at me, his expression unreadable, his eyes colder than I had ever seen them. "You're not the only one who's been keeping secrets, Jessica," he said, his voice disturbingly even. "I think it's time you understand. I've been making plans of my own. And they're going to change everything." The world tilted beneath me. What did that mean? What had he been hiding? The days that followed unraveled like a slow-burning nightmare. I had braced myself for a confrontation, for tears, for screaming, for a fight that would break us beyond repair. But that never came. Instead, Benjamin became distant. Not just angry, detached, unreadable in a way that sent my thoughts spiraling. He wasn't just shutting me out. It was something else entirely. Was he done with me? Or was this some kind of twisted game? I searched for answers in his silence, but there was nothing to grasp onto. Every time I tried to reach him, he slipped further away, leaving behind only the cold, empty space between us. His indifference cut deeper than any argument ever could. It was worse than anger. It was punishment. And the most agonizing part, I deserved it. Jack's touch, his stolen kisses, the reckless thrill of something forbidden, it had all turned to ash in my hands. I kept asking myself if it had been worth it. The answer was painfully, brutally clear. And then, just when I thought I had lost everything, something happened that shattered what little remained. A message. It came from an unknown number, the screen of my phone glowing in the darkness of my bedroom. My pulse pounded as I hesitated before opening it, a creeping dread slithering through me. The second my eyes landed on the image attached, my breath caught in my throat. Benjamin. With another woman. The sight of it hit me like a slap, raw and stinging. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, my heartbeat erratic, wild. Was this his revenge? Or had there been more to his story than I had ever realized? I stood there, frozen, as everything I thought I knew about Benjamin, about us, crumbled into dust around me. The damage had been done. The trust, the love, the connection, it was all shattered, reduced to nothing but broken pieces scattered at our feet. And now, I had nothing left. Nothing but the consequences of my own betrayal. Benjamin's final words echoed in my mind, haunting, unrelenting. "You've lost everything. But now so have I." He had the power to forgive me, to give us another chance. But after everything, I wasn't sure he ever would. And worse than that, I wasn't sure I could forgive myself.